and welcome everybody to Financial Wellness with Parkinson's. My name is Melanie Dizon, and I am the Director of Education at the Davis Phinney Foundation. And I am here with Alice Lightner Johnson, who's going to be talking to us about financial wellness with Parkinson's. Hi, Alice. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it over to Alice in a second. I just want to tell you a little bit of information about her, and then she's gonna tell you a lot more information about her and how she got into this type of work. A few things about this webinar that's going to be a little bit different from the ones in the past is that her presentation is going to be about 50 minutes, and we're going to use a PowerPoint. There's a lot of information to convey, and there's a lot of different groups of people that are listening, and we want to make sure that we do a great foundation and a great overview of what it means to be financially well with Parkinson's. And so we are not going to take the time for questions for a Q&A this time because people are in really different situations, and that could be complicated and difficult for Alice to answer all those different types of questions. So the best thing to do is, if you're listening to her presentation and this brings up questions for you, is to email me. That's Melanie, and my email is blog, B-L-O-G, @dpf.org, and I will make sure that Alice gets the questions that I think would be helpful for her to answer. And then when we post the recording on our blog, we'll include some questions and answers. So I don't want to say that there's no opportunity for question and answers. We're just going to try and not make it during this hour. So definitely keep your questions, but just send them to me via email. Okay, so we'll get started. Alice Lightner Johnson has over 10 years of experience working with clients in the financial services industry, including several national brokerage firms. She's also earned her Series 7 and 63 securities licenses. She provides financial and estate organization and move management and clean-out services for her clients in St. Paul. She also loves helping clients who are going through difficult losses to reduce the stress that comes with financial matters so they can focus on what's most important, their own health and well-being. Thank you, Alice. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for having me this afternoon. And as Melanie said, I worked in the financial services business for many years, and on the brokerage side and on the trust side. And I saw so many instances of clients and their families dealing with the negative fallout that can happen from not planning and having your financial and legal affairs in order. And so I saw a need there, and that's what inspired me to start my business, helping people one-on-one and guiding them through these issues before a crisis hits. That's the key thing, to get prepared before anything happens. So I'm going to just quickly do a little disclaimer to start. And the information that I'm presenting is intended for educational purposes, and I'm not a licensed attorney or financial planner, so it's very important for you to consult with your own professional advisors before you make a plan or make any changes to your plan.
Alice, real quick, I don't want to hold you up, but just make sure that you're standing right in front of the microphone, because you were kind of going out a little bit.
Oh, really? Okay.
It sounds fine now. Just
okay. I'll maybe put the volume up a little more. Okay. So are you prepared? That's the big question. And what got me excited about talking with you today is that I think when you're living with something like Parkinson's, there's so much unknown about your health and where things are going to be from week to week and month to month. And I think that getting your finances and your legal affairs in order is something that you can control and do something about. Everyone has an estate. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. And so I hope today to make the process seem less daunting and to give you a roadmap to feeling better or so you feel comfortable talking about these topics with your loved ones. So I'm going to go through some basics of estate planning and give you some ideas for building a team to help and support you, and some tips for examining your budget and organizing all of that information. So taking the steps to get your finances organized, especially in the face of a chronic illness, will alleviate stress for you and for your loved ones. Knowing your affairs are in order will allow you to focus on your physical and mental well-being and truly enjoy the time you have with your loved ones. So I'm going to start with the asset inventory, and this is a big first step, I think, to take in getting your finances organized. So who, what, and where is the information you're going to be gathering. And putting together an asset inventory is basically just making a list of everything you own and everything you owe. If you haven't done any estate planning yet, this is usually the first thing an attorney is going to want to see. They're going to need to get a picture of what your financial situation is. So if you walk into a first meeting with an attorney and you have all of this information together, you're going to have saved yourself a lot of time. So one of the first things you're going to want to be looking at is who owns that asset or liability or debt. Basically, whose names are on those accounts. Is that asset held in single name, joint names, or in the name of a trust? What is the asset? What is that asset or liability? Some examples would be a checking or savings account, home, and any property that you own, and things like life insurance. A liability example would include like your mortgage on your house, a car loan, home equity loans, credit card debt, anything like that you owe money. It's also helpful, especially if you're working with an attorney on estate plan, they're going to need to know sort of what the approximate value or the amount of that asset or liability is. So that's a good information to include on your inventory. So where is that asset held? Is it at a bank or a brokerage firm? Is it, say, stock certificates or something like that in a safe deposit box? Is it held in an online account? That you'd want to include all that information on your inventory. What's the address or location of a home or property that you own? And then be sure to include any assets that are held just virtually or held online. So I've got a little sample asset inventory here. And I have this is Jane and John Doe, and they have a daughter, Anne. And I'll just run through the different assets here. So they've got a checking account. They have an investment account, their home, there's a life insurance policy, and a safe deposit box. So here you can see the different names or the titles on those accounts. So the checking account is just in John's name, and their investment account is in John and Jane's name, and that JTWROS, that stands for Joint Tenants with Rights of Survival, and you'll see that a lot of times on statements. And a lot of people don't really know what that means, but basically it just means that when people die, that asset automatically goes to the surviving person.
Can you repeat that, Alice? So you kind of cut out on that one. I think it's an important point.
Okay, I had a little thing that said my internet connection's unstable, so I don't know if that's affecting how it's coming through. But so you mean the joint tenants part?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So that the account that has the JTWROS, that stands for Joint Tenants with Rights of Survival. And that's just an abbreviation that shows up on a lot of statements. And it basically just means that it's a joint asset until one of the people, the owner, dies. That asset automatically becomes the property of the surviving person on that account. On my sample asset inventory, the residence is just held in Jane's name. She bought that before they were married. So that's another thing to be aware of. If you bought a home when you were still single, the deed that's going to remain in single name unless you change it. And she's got let's see, John has got an insurance policy just in his name, and then their safe deposit box is in both names. So the other, on this asset inventory, I have beneficiary information and other information that might be pertinent. And I'm going to talk about more about beneficiaries later in the presentation. But in this case, there's the checking account that is in John's name is, there's something called transfer on death that you can do at financial institutions, which I will address also a little later. But that means that account will automatically go to Jane and then to Anne if Jane dies. The residents, they have their deed is located in the safe deposit box, and that's an important thing to note as well, where papers like that are held. The life insurance policy has a beneficiary, which is Jane, and oh goodness, I'm sorry. And then the safe deposit box, Anne is authorized to have access, and they've noted where the key for the safe deposit box is. That can be important. I've worked with clients where that is an issue. Nobody knows where the key is, and then the banks have to go and drill out the box, and that can be expensive. So if you do have a safe deposit box, that's an important thing to be aware of.
Quick question on the investment account. For the beneficiary, you don't have anything listed. I know that if John dies, it goes to Jane, but what if they both die and there's nobody listed? That's just going to go into probate, or it's just something you want to make sure that even if you have a JTWROS, you want to make sure that you do have a beneficiary. Right? You'll probably talk about that later, but I just want to clear that one for right now.
And another thing with the joint accounts there, and this differs by state, and I'm not sure what the current, the laws are going to be different. I know in California, there's there's also tenants in common designation. So that is definitely something that would be worthwhile talking with an attorney about, is how to have any joint accounts titled, because there are different laws that can dictate the best way to do that. So I'll be referring back to this just because I think it kind of is a helpful illustration of different situations. So another type of asset that is becoming more and more prevalent, obviously, are digital assets. And you will definitely want to keep records of passwords for your hardware, things like computer, your smartphone, tablets, any of those devices, so that people, your loved ones or beneficiaries, know how to access those devices. Same thing with things like social media, Facebook, Instagram. If you have photos stored on photo storage sites, I had a client who all of their pictures were on a computer and they didn't know how to get into the photo site, and they were worried they were going to lose all of those. So you want to make sure that people know how to access those accounts. The same thing with financial institutions. If you do all of your banking online, if you have something like cryptocurrencies where it's a virtual currency, you don't have a hard asset there, it's even more important to have that information noted, where these financial institutions are and how to get access to the accounts. And another important asset would be if you have websites, if you have domain names or blogs that you manage. Those are definitely your intellectual property and an asset. So those, in that case, if you have extensive digital, it would definitely be worthwhile to consult with an attorney about making a digital estate plan. And that's becoming more and more prevalent. And different states are now addressing these fiduciary access issues. And so it's worthwhile to have an attorney who can help you navigate that area with digital assets. So I'm going to talk a little bit about legal documents and just go through some sort of basic estate planning. Like I said at the beginning, I think there's a conception out there, or a misconception out there, that it's only people with a lot of money that need to do estate planning, and that's really, that's kind of dangerous, because everyone, as I said before, everyone has an estate, doesn't matter how small. And it's important that you have the legal documents in place to make sure your affairs are carried out the way you want to. So having the proper legal documents in place, ensure your assets will work for you if you become incapacitated, and that they'll flow seamlessly to your beneficiaries after your death. When you put together, when your legal documents are completed, you'll want to make sure that people who are appointed, that they all have copies. Another important thing is that they know where the originals are located. And when I say originals, that means the original piece of paper that has the actual signature on it. A lot of times, sometimes in court, they will want to see an original will, or sometimes financial institutions will want to see an original power of attorney. So it's important that you know, or that the appropriate people know where those things are located. So the documents I'm going to run through are power of attorney, even though it doesn't apply to finances at all. It's definitely an important document that everyone should have. A revocable trust, which is a document that's in force while you're living, and then a will or a trust, which becomes in force after you die. So the power of attorney, and I think this one, especially for if you are dealing with Parkinson's, this can be a really good tool to have, because it basically, you appoint an attorney, in fact, who will act on your behalf in financial transactions. So as your illness progresses, and if you become incapacitated in any way, you know that your financial affairs can be taken care of by this person that you appoint. And the power of attorney forms do generally differ by state, so you want to just be aware of that, because you can find them online, but you want to make sure you have the proper one. So a power of attorney is completely separate from a person that you designate to make healthcare decisions. So this is someone who is solely helping you with your financial matters. And in most power of attorney forms, you can be pretty specific about what transactions that person is allowed to transact for you. So it sort of depends on your situation, but you can get pretty specific. And as I said, this can be in effect when you're incapacitated or incompetent. It's just obviously you need to get it in place before that happens. So a good attorney can, you can find these forms online, and they're pretty basic. And then I think you just need to have it notarized. But with something, when you're with Parkinson's and when you're going to have different stages in that Parkinson's journey, it would probably be good to have an attorney create this document for you so that it can cover you at all the different stages that you're going to encounter along the way. With the power of attorney, you definitely want to be careful with who you designate to take on this role. You are giving this person the power to basically take over, they have the ability to take over any of your financial accounts. And so you want to be very careful with who you are giving that responsibility to. You want someone who is good with money. You want someone who's responsible and that you can trust. And so it's definitely something to be thinking about very carefully. So the healthcare directive, that's another important form, and isn't affecting your finances at all, but as you all probably know, this is a document that appoints someone to make medical decisions on your behalf. The more specific you are about the kind of care you want to receive, the better. And a lot of attorneys will draw up a healthcare directive for you as part of an estate planning package. But I know that a lot of healthcare providers have the forms that you need, or they can be found online. And usually these are also state specific. So you just want to make sure you're using the correct form that is going to be enforced in your state. And with all of these documents, you definitely want to give copies to the person that you've appointed and also to your healthcare providers. So this is another important one, the will. And basically what a will does is it just directs how your assets are distributed after your death. It can appoint someone as guardian if you have minor children. It appoints someone as guardian of your children. And it also appoints a personal representative, and that can be an individual. It can be a lot of times there's financial institutions that can act as your personal rep or executor if you don't have anyone that is up to the task. And a will is basically if you do not have a will at all, your assets and even things like who's going to be guardian of your children, it all falls to the courts. And so the courts decide how your assets are distributed and who's going to be the guardians of your kids. So at a minimum, you certainly would want to get a will in place. And you can, if going and seeing an attorney is not in the cards for you, there's a lot of resources online now where you can, there's LegalZoom and others where you can just make up even a basic will that can cover some of the main things. And you can also do, there's a Quicken Willmaker Plus that you can use. The only negative with those is that because of the Parkinson's disease, that can, or Parkinson's illness, that can it can definitely be more beneficial to go to an attorney to help address some of the things that are going to come up with specifically with your illness. So as I said, it doesn't really have to be expensive because there's lots of options for just getting a basic will put together. So some other, another document that is can be good to have is a trust. And trusts used to be pretty much used, a lot of people think of them as being for the very wealthy because they were used as sort of a vehicle to avoid estate taxes. But because of the way the estate tax laws have changed over the years, that's not necessarily true anymore. And they can be a very useful vehicle for transferring assets to your heirs without having to go through probate. So a trust is basically a legal entity which assets become property of the trust and are overseen by a trustee. And a trust will, as I said, allows the assets to pass to your heirs without going through probate. And it has a beneficiary or beneficiaries similar to a life insurance policy. And again, an attorney can help you craft a trust that is going to be useful to what your situation is, and definitely can be a good thing, especially if your illness progresses to the point where you're not able to handle a lot of things. Then it can be very helpful to have a trust. Okay, so now I'm going to just talk about building a team and having a team of people on your side to help with putting together your plans is going to be critical to the success of your financial wellness efforts. So the members of your team would be having an attorney and a financial advisor or planner, a CPA or a tax advisor, and a spouse or an adult child or trusted relative or friend to take on the role of being sort of your financial point person. And that would be, and we'll talk about that, but specifically someone to serve as your power of attorney or the executor of your estate. And a lot of people, you know, where do I find these people? What's the best way to go about looking for these members of your team? And I would suggest to start with asking people that you know, relatives, friends, neighbors, people that might find out if they have somebody in any of these roles that they really like or would recommend. That's a great way to get someone that's gonna give you good service. And another way to find out too is if you have a financial advisor, a lot of times they will have attorneys that they work with and that they recommend. And so a lot of times you can ask those folks for referrals. I think it's very important to have somebody that you feel comfortable with and that you feel like you have a good rapport with and that understands you. They're responsive, and you don't want somebody who is maybe, a lot of complaints that I've had clients say is that sometimes they'll use a lot of terms and things that people don't understand and don't explain things very well. So you definitely want someone that you feel comfortable with. And it's equally important that the professionals that you choose to be on your team understand your unique health situation with your Parkinson's and the circumstances surrounding that. So first member of your team that's important would be an attorney, and a knowledgeable attorney who knows your situation can craft the proper legal documents to ensure that your wishes are carried out at all stages of your illness, while you're alive and after you die. Having the proper documents in place will also determine if your estate will pass cleanly to your heirs or if it will have to go through probate, which can be time-consuming, stressful, and sometimes can be costly. So you definitely want to avoid that if you can. And some of the basic documents which we went through would be power of attorney for financial decisions, a healthcare or advance directive with regards to your medical situation, and a will or trust. So another person that is good to have on your team is a financial advisor or planner. And it would be good for this person to have knowledge of your complete financial picture. They can advise you well and can help you with investments and cash planning to ensure that your needs and the needs of your family are met. The thing about using a professional advisor or planner is that they a lot of times will have very useful tools and software where they can plug in different situations and make projections about your finances down the road under all different kinds of scenarios. So especially with your Parkinson's illness, that can be very helpful as your situation may be changing and you don't know what's coming. So that could be very helpful, having an advisor who can help you make those plans. It's important for your advisor to know who you've appointed as your financial power of attorney and have a copy of that completed document, because there may come a time when that person will have to step in, and it would be good if the advisor or the financial advisor has a relationship with that person who's going to be stepping in for you. So a CPA tax advisor is another good person to have on your team. They are certainly going to be very helpful to have, especially if your financial situation is complex. Let's say you own a business or have a lot of some complicated assets or something. It's great to have an advisor who can ensure that everything is going to be covered from a tax standpoint. Just having someone be on top of tax law changes, which it seems from year to year, things get shifted around. So it's very good to have someone that is on top of all that and see how that's going to affect your financial situation. And just having someone to ask questions of can be very valuable. And ideally, this person is going to have contact information for your financial advisor and your attorney, so that if they need to, they can confer about your, if you have anything that comes up, they know each other and are able to reach each other if needed. So another person to have designated on your team would be a family member, and this would be an adult child or a spouse, a trusted relative or friend who is up to the task of being your financial point person. You are going to need this person for, let's say, for your power of attorney. So they should be good with money and willing and able to step in and help take care of your finances if it's needed. As well as with the power of attorney, it's always good to have a backup, they call it a successor power of attorney. So if that original person that you designate is not able to serve, that you have a backup. So it's always good to have a few people sort of in your quiver, so to speak, to be able to appoint for these different roles if you need them. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the term beneficiaries a little bit and what that means and why it's important to pay attention to those that you have designated. Most retirement assets, so this would include things like pensions, 401ks, IRAs, and all life insurance policies, you designate a primary and contingent beneficiary usually when you fill out the paperwork to open those accounts. Sometimes people don't put anything in there. I think you have to include the Social Security numbers, and I've seen cases where people forget to fill in this information, or they're going to go back and do it and then forget to do that. And then those assets are going to end up just having to go through probate. So it's good to make sure that those beneficiaries are filled in so that those assets will automatically flow to those designated upon your death. And it's good to have all of this information on your asset inventory and review those designations annually, because if the beneficiary changes, say the person passes away, or if there's a divorce, there was actually a court case that I read about where an ex-spouse had been designated as the beneficiary, and then the children from the second marriage were contesting that, and the court ruled in favor of the ex-spouse. So she, what you put on those designations are important, and so you want to make sure that you've got the correct people in place to be those beneficiaries. It's also good to update those beneficiary designations to make sure that they're matching with your estate plan. One case I can think of would be if you end up setting up a trust, you would want to change that beneficiary designation to be your trust, so that, again, those assets will flow upon your death. It'll go right into the trust. It'll avoid probate, and it'll get sent out according to the terms of the trust. So back when I was showing you the asset inventory that I'd made up, there was a transfer pay on death option. And this is something not a lot of people know about, surprisingly, but it's usually applies in the case where it's just a single person. So if you're not married, or if your spouse has passed away and you have accounts only in single name, only in your name, this is an option for where you can designate a person to receive those assets. And it's basically just filling out a form with the financial institution with who you want that asset to go to. I just read an article that there are certain states now that, I think Colorado is one of them, that you can actually do this with hard assets like a car or property. So that's kind of interesting and something to definitely ask your attorney about, if that's something that would apply to your situation. And as far as beneficiaries go, once you appoint somebody, it's really important to talk with those folks um, and tell them that you've designated them as a beneficiary. And also, if you have parents or family members who've designated you as their beneficiary, you should talk with them about that, because again, if depending on what your estate plan has said, you might need to update, they might need to update their designation based on what you've put together with your estate plan. Okay, so we're gonna get away from some of the legal talk here and just look a little more at some budgeting and things to take a look at. So it's good to just sit down and take a really clear-eyed approach to looking at what you've got coming in and going out currently. So sit down and just analyze your current income and current expenses. You can just go through credit and debit card statements and highlight expenses that could maybe be cut back or that you really don't need anymore to be able to start cutting back on how much you've got going out. If you have credit card debt, it's good to make a plan for paying that off. And if you haven't already, it's highly advisable to start making some automatic contributions to an emergency fund. And this could just be as simple as just setting up an automatic deduction so that you don't really even, hopefully don't miss the money as much when it's just automatically coming out. Most financial experts recommend that you have 3 to 6 months of expenses in your emergency fund. And certainly with having an illness like Parkinson's, where you might have some surprises come up, so maybe some medical expenses or something that you weren't expecting, it's good to have some funds stashed away so that you are not put in a bad situation. And maybe start gathering, and might change over the course of your illness. Are you going to need to take disability payments at any time? Will you need to be drawing on Social Security or retirement plans early? Again, this is another benefit of having that financial advisor or planner on your team, that they can help you with plugging in different scenarios so that you can see how things might play out down the road. It's also good to make some projections about expenses that might come up over the course of your illness. That would be including healthcare expenses, healthcare aides that you might need to hire, alterations that might need to happen in your home. So again, working with your financial advisor to see, make sure that you've got possible expenses laid out. And I think sometimes planning ahead of time is going to help alleviate some stress and anxiety about that coming up. So another good thing to help take care of some of the stress and anxiety of dealing with your finances is just to plain simplify things. Consolidate loans and financial accounts. If you have a lot of different say you have a whole bunch of different credit cards, maybe consolidate those into one or two. If you have financial accounts spread out in different places, I know a lot of times when they switch jobs, you will leave a retirement account or 401k account with a company and then go on to another job, and then you have another account somewhere. So it can be very helpful to just roll those things all into one account. You're going to save yourself money on fees and whatnot, and it's just simplifies everything. You cut down on the amount of mail you're getting and all those kinds of things. It's also helpful to set up automatic deposits and online bill pays. So just get your paychecks deposited automatically so you don't have to worry about getting to the bank. And you can set up bills online. If you do online banking, you can set those up to get paid automatically. And that will help too with if you do end up having, if a power attorney does need to step in, or a family member needs to step in and help with these things, it's going to make things much easier for them if these things are set up ahead of time. And just a lot of times, just reducing the amount of mail that comes into the home can help a lot. So just go paperless on statements if you feel comfortable with that. And it's definitely a lot less to have to deal with. Make sure that your financial point person and or power of attorney knows how to access these accounts. So if you do set everything up paperless, if you do set up your online bill pays, certainly make sure that those folks know how to get access and include all of this information on your asset inventory. So organizing all of these documents and financial papers, there's a lot of different ways you can go about that. You definitely want to have copies of your legal documents in a clearly marked binder or a file. You should also make note, as I had mentioned before, you want to make note of where those originals are held, if they're in a safety deposit box or with the attorney. What I do for my clients is I have just a binder with all copies of all those things and their asset inventory, and everything is all in one place. So yep, include a copy of your asset inventory. And it's also helpful to have names and contact information for your team and your advisors, so that if your loved ones need to get in touch with those people, they know how to do that, and that it's all in one place. Make sure that those loved ones and pertinent people know where you are keeping this information. If you're comfortable with keeping things online, there are some companies that do online storage of documents. There's a company called Everplans, and you can keep things online there. If you are if you like having paper, if you're more comfortable with hard copies, I worked with an office company called Smead I consulted with them as they created a life documents file system, and it's just a box that they have pre-printed labels and categories for filing all of these important life documents. And so that's a handy way to do that, or you can just make your own. But I think the point is to have things pretty much in one place if you can. So communication, this is the most important aspect of having all your things organized, because it's super important to sit down and talk through these things with your loved ones. I think there's definitely a stigma in our society around talking about finances and money and death, and that you just, I think a lot of generations just you don't talk about those things, but it's very important to fill in your family and make sure that they know what your plans are and where to find things. So it's good to meet in person with family members or beneficiaries who are important so that they understand your wishes and what their roles are going to be. As I said before, let them know where to find your important documents and information. And ensure that your team of professionals is kept up to date on the progression of your illness, so that they know where things stand with you and that they are able to give you the service that you need and help you and your loved ones feel comfortable. And it's always a good idea to, after you have these conversations, to follow them up in writing so that they've got something that in black and white that reminds them of what their roles are going to be and what your wishes are. So I've got some resources here that can be helpful. The American Bar Association has a website, and this can be a good place to start if you're interested in looking into more about estate planning, probate, and I know in Minnesota, our attorney general's office has a very good website that, and a pamphlet that they can send out that helps people again with planning your legal documents. It also has information about for caregivers who are maybe managing finances for folks or for loved ones. And the sort of the legal aspects of around all of that. So this is a very good place to start. And then you can always check and see if the Attorney General in your state has a website with those kinds of, that kind of information on it. And I mentioned this company called Everplans. And they actually have a lot of some interesting articles and checklists along with this online storage of documents. They kind of go through some of the things we've been talking about today, but that can be a good place to check out if you are looking for more information. And then this is the website for the Life Documents Organizer Kit that I talked about, that is made by Smead, the office company. Ooh, and there's also a website for the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, which is, those are fee-based advisors, and that again can just be sort of a first stop. If you are looking for somebody, you can plug in your location, and I think they'll bring up a list of different advisors to talk to. They also have some good information about what kinds of questions you should ask a financial advisor, some things to be on the lookout for and be aware of. So that can be a good resource as well. And if you live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, I meet with clients one-on-one to help with these all of these things that we've been discussing today. So I would love to hear from you. And I think I'm wrapping up a little early, Melanie, but.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Alice. I'm gonna see here how I want to do this. Okay, yep, that's great. Thank you. So thanks everybody for being here today. Like I said, if you have a question that relates to what Alice talked about today, please email me at blog@dpf.org, and I will send those questions to Alice, and hopefully we can get some answers for you. This will be recorded. We'll put it on our blog and on our YouTube channel, and I will definitely send out the PowerPoint presentation so you have that as well. Alice, it's very obvious that you are into organization. I love the way that you organized all of this. I think that it really gives people a great checklist and list of things to do, things that people can do right now. I love the asset inventory. I'm going to go home and do that myself over Christmas break.
Oh, good. Yep.
And yeah, I just think it was a really great resource and tool for people. So I will include the resources that Alice gave us and a couple more that have come in. And if you have any questions, email me. Otherwise, thank you all so much for coming, and we will see you in 2020.
Thank you.